call this Board of Commissioners back into session on this 8th day of February 2012. And Commissioner Wallman, will you lead us in the invocation, please?
Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to gather together in your presence. Lord, we just ask that you will inspire us with courage that is born of loyalty to you and all that is noble and worthy. Lord, we just ask that you protect us, that you intercede in the affairs of our county, and that you help us to make the right decisions in all that we do. We pray this in the name of our great friend and master of all men, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda is, there are actually two items. First item is to consider the economic development incentive agreement between the county and Cloverleaf. And Bob?
Yes, ma'am. It is good to be here again this morning, and I appreciate you recessing the meeting to consider this proposal. You have a grant agreement in front of you that's been put together that reflects the discussion that we've had and the ideas behind the proposal that we have, which is basically a 5-year 50% deal. It structures the payments of $41,000 plus over a period of 5 years as the investment is made. The investment is expected to be in place January 1, 2014. First payment would be made then in 2015, January 15 of 2015. So it's quite a few years down the road, and it just kind of lays it out. The first part of it, you've got a 3-part agreement in front of you. One is the agreement between the company and the Economic Development Corporation. The second piece of that is which is Exhibit A, is the agreement between the county and the Economic Development Corporation. And then the third part of that is the agreement between the city and the Economic Development Corporation, which when totaled out over a 5-year period of time, if those payments are made from both the city and the county at the full recommended, and that's going to be looked at on an annual basis, it would end up being $355,000 over that 5-year period of time. Now we will, every year, as the infrastructure, as the improvements are made on the piece of property, we will take a look at that. We'll sit down with Dwayne, Lisa here at the county, and then take that same information over to Melissa, over to city, before any payments are made. And that's there's nothing forward funded in this particular agreement. Just an agreement to fund this over a period of time. Dale, did I capture kind of the highlights of it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Hayes?
I'd like to make a motion
Okay.
that the resolution that is before us approving or authorizing the expenditure of funds for an economic development project and approving an agreement with the Lee County Economic Development Corporation vis-a-vis Clover Leaf Cold Storage Company be approved as presented.
Motion has been made to approve the incentive agreement. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Commissioner Wallman?
Yes, there's an inconsistency between the agreement and the resolution, and I think we need to resolve that. The agreement says, find the correct citation here, starting on page 2 of 29, at the bottom in 1C, it says, it is describing what the county or what the company will do, and it says, the last section there, which will have a cumulative ad valorem taxable value of at least $12 million and will create at least 58 new jobs over 2 years. In the resolution, it says that we're asking you to sign, it says that they will create up to 58 new jobs. And creating up to something, they might create 0 jobs and they would still be eligible under the resolution. If you look at the agreement, they would have to create at least 58 or be subject to a reduced incentive. So there is an inconsistency there in that language. And that definitely needs to be resolved some way or another.
Mr. Crumpton, do you want to?
I'm gonna let, the attorney wrote it, I'm gonna let him comment.
I want to change the resolution to conform to the agreement with the language of at least being substituted for the language up to in the resolution.
That will reconcile that part.
Okay. Do you have other concerns?
Yeah, I have several others.
Commissioner Reeves?
I was gonna say, you probably should amend your motion.
Yes. Accepted.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Commissioner Walden?
Yeah, I want to, again, get clarification for public record, what the, how that is measured under, again, on top of page 4, where it says if the average annual wage, taking the new jobs at the project during the same period, does not equal or exceed $22,519. How is that wage measured, Bob?
We will look at the NCUI 101 form that they'll provide to us,
Okay.
and that's how we'll look at it.
All right, so that form, and we'll take the not the median, but the mean wage, is that what it is, or is it
Right.
each and every job?
It'll be the average for those jobs over the quarter, over those number of jobs over the quarter.
Okay, so the average in this case is referring to the mean wage of those 58 or more employees. If they choose to hire 65 employees instead of 58, will it be the mean wage of those 65? Or will it be just the first 58?
Yeah. I think, thinking about that NCU 101 form, you really do look at the total number of positions at the facility.
Right.
Not just the new 58 jobs.
Ooh, okay, because it doesn't say that here in the agreement. It says that if the average annual wage paid to the employees taking the new jobs. So we have to have a way to measure from that NC 101 form what those 58 or 65 or whatever it is new jobs. Otherwise, we'll have a commingling of data that will be very difficult to certify.
We'll sit down with the company and we'll get those things. Make sure that the idea behind all of this is that they get at least to that 22,519. I don't know that that's going to be a problem, but we'll sit down and talk to them and say, okay, if you were to segregate those jobs that we were talking about that you've created, the ones we're going to count as part of this agreement, from the 22, for instance, that they have today, or any additional above the 58 that they might hire in ensuing years, we'll talk to them about that.
All right, well, and again, I am sure that our intention is to hold them accountable. What I'm trying to make sure of is here, when we lay the groundwork up front, there's not any loopholes, there are not any options for the company to get around a particular thing,
Yeah.
like saying, well, that's not what's in the contract.
Right. And you know, we start out, I guess, from the position of we're dealing with honorable people, okay? And they're signing a contract as honorable people. And they're signing that agreement that's got an awful lot of caveats and conditions associated with the grant money that would be received by the company. We'll work with them to make sure that they satisfy the conditions that the commissioners or city council puts on them as part of this agreement. We'll just get the information. It really will not be a problem.
All right.
I'm telling you.
Are there any things in this particular agreement that would encumber or obligate the county for reporting back to the state? This is all just about the county
That's
and the
correct.
city incentive.
That's correct.
And we're, as a county, going to collect all the information required by North Carolina general statutes for clawbacks. We're gonna be there to collect and verify that data. We have the mechanism in place to collect and verify that data to meet our requirements.
I believe we do.
Okay.
This agreement, you don't have a previous agreement in front of you, but there are distinct differences between former agreements and
Right.
this particular agreement. So I think in this agreement, you see a little bit more of some of the things that all the commissioners have talked about.
Right.
So I think it's a good agreement, you know, but maybe still not at the point where it's really cumbersome and maybe negative, you know, for the company to enter into, or maybe a problem for the company to enter into.
I got a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
One is, Does the company have any obligation to us beyond the 58 jobs?
They have the obligation for the investment that they're going to receive. We're still going to look at the investment, and for instance, and we're assuming at this point, and it's all a crystal ball at this point, and you can see that 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, we're going to be looking at making our first payment with that. So there's a lot of time for them to put that $12 million worth of investment on the ground that we think it's going to be. You know, if the prices go out, if they go out and get prices for their facilities, because of the market, because of whatever, it ends up costing them $14 million. We may only end up seeing $8 million on the tax books based on the North Carolina Department of Revenue per square foot price for that type of facility. And so, while it may cost the company X amount, it may only end up on the tax books for an amount. And that's what we'll look at after the project is complete. We'll take a look at that, and then we have a way to reduce the amount of the grant. It will never exceed the $41,000, but we have a way to reduce the amount of the grant should the investment not be there.
You didn't mention the 22 other jobs, though. It says that they'll maintain that level as well as the new jobs. How do we measure that?
It's in the agreement.
Yes, that's what I said.
Yeah.
He asked a question about whether they have any other obligations to us. That's in there. So is that NC 101, does that identify the old jobs as well as the new ones?
If I may, Madam Chair, page 5 of 29, that's page 6 in the agenda, paragraphs H and I think address your question, Commissioner Parks. H puts the burden on the company to provide all records that would document their compliance.
Oh, okay. I was just asking about the NCU 101, whether that identifies it or not, but if we ask it otherwise, that's fine.
Yes, sir, and then I also, beyond requiring them to provide it, gives the county and the EDC authority to go inspect any books related to the performance.
I think just to answer your question again about NCU, it really is a total number of jobs and total amount of payroll. Okay, so it doesn't distinguish between what's there and what may be added.
Okay,
But it shows a total. But we can ask them those types of
It
questions.
does show you on a quarterly basis.
Robert, did we answer your question?
I think, I'm not sure you did, but let me ask you about the Form NC 101.
I don't have one in front of me, but you.
That was in the older commissioner's packet. We had it when we first looked at this. Yeah, it's not this one. No, the draft, just the generic 101 form.
I'll figure it out. Thank you.
Basically, what that shows you, Commissioner Reeves, at the top, it shows first quarter employees, second quarter employees, third quarter employees. It shows you total payroll, and then there's a listing at the bottom that has every employee and their wages. So, any other questions?
I have a couple of more things that I would like to understand. Help me, and maybe Mr. Talbert knows where this is in the agreement. I can't find it. Where we describe very clearly what our mechanism for reducing or eliminating the amount of funding is. I see where it's addressed, but I don't see where it describes the mechanism we use to reduce or eliminate. So, for example, let's say that instead of 58 new jobs, it's 50. How would the company automatically know how much less they're going to get in here?
Bob, you want to answer that, or you want me to go first?
Go first.
All right. There is not a clawback for the company's failure to achieve the number of jobs that they have indicated they would create.
Really?
That is correct. The clawback is based upon the company's failure to comply with the wage standard rather than number of jobs.
But is that compliant with case law and
Absolutely.
statutes? And under what interpretation? I thought we had to have detailed clawbacks for every aspect of these incentive agreements.
Well, I can hand this out to the board, but let me first say that Ms. Patterson and I drafted this as a collaborative effort since the city would be involved. We discussed those issues, and we both came to the conclusion that a clawback for every provision of performance standard, not required. And I think that's supported by Mr. Mulligan's post on the the School of Government's website dated October 28, 2009, in which he indicates that to ensure incentives are governed by an agreement which comports with statutory requirements, you may have clawbacks for all of these things individually, but you do not have to.
Is that consistent with what the One North Carolina Fund does? Do they just have certain clawbacks and not comprehensive clawbacks?
The forms that I've seen from NC1 where jobs are involved, the promise to create jobs, they do have a clawback for failure to perform that standard.
And I thought in a previous meeting you said you were efforting to make sure all of our future agreements were comported with the One North Carolina Fund.
Where the performance standard was mandatory. My understanding, Bob, and maybe you can address this, is that the creation of these jobs is not a performance standard.
It's not a performance standard at the local level. It is a performance standard at
Right.
the state level. And that's really for any grant programs that the state has, whether it's one NC, whether it's North Carolina Rural Center, Department of Commerce. They are based on a number per job, or a price per job, so to speak. And that's why you see some of that language. All the language that you see in one NC is all based on the jobs. If they don't create the jobs, they're not going to get as much money. So when we report, for instance, with the ZERN agreement, when they come in and say, well, we've created the 38 jobs they're talking about, and we'd like to see if we can collect the money from one NC, they're going to have to show us the 38 jobs. If they end up being 30 jobs, they're going to be cut short. And there's even provision in one NC that if it's cut short a lot, ends up being 15 out of the 38, they may not give them the grant at all. I mean, I think there's some language in there like that.
If I might, go ahead.
The investment is also a clawback in this agreement. You know, if they don't make the $12 million investment,
It's reduced.
it's reduced.
I might be stepping over the line a little bit here, and I apologize if I do. But I seem to recall words to the effect from Mr. Mulligan when he gave us our 2-hour orientation on this stuff, that he said there was only one of the 4 criterion that it seems to be in case law, seems to be consistent in every test case and incentives. One component of the 4. And it wasn't interstate competition, it wasn't continuous ops, it wasn't investment, it was jobs. That's the one thing that he highlighted. He said that must be evident, and there must be a clawback for every one of those. Now, I say that this is my interpretation of what he said. My interpretation is that Mr. Mulligan has, and that was the least, the threshold that you had to at least meet. Not the ideal, but the minimum threshold was there must be jobs addressment in the clawback, because that seems to be the one theme that's consistent in all the court cases. That jobs were always, wherever there was a jobs issue, that clawback had to be there. And he didn't talk about average wage or median wage or whatever. He was talking about jobs. So to have an agreement that doesn't have a jobs clawback in it, I think is not meeting sufficiency. And I'm not a lawyer, I'll admit, but I think that we're insufficient in our agreement. And I don't think it would stand a test in a court case. I just don't.
Well, not only that, but you know, banks ask for collateral when they give loans. Okay, essentially we're giving a loan, but maybe they're not paying it back except in taxes. But the fact is, if we don't have some clawback in there for the jobs, they have really no requirement to do that, except it's a handshake deal, Bob.
You know, it's anticipated, and I've always said this, that first of all, if you have the company there, there's a better chance of having jobs and no job than not having jobs.
Well, yeah, but if they're getting the money, though, they're saying we're going to produce this many jobs for this amount of money, why wouldn't you put the clawback in there?
They anticipate. There are things
No,
that happen.
anticipation doesn't do anything for me. I ask you a question. Why wouldn't you put it in there?
We do have it in there for the investment, and we will pay based on that investment. Okay, and we anticipate those jobs being created because they said they were going to need those people in order to be able to do what they do at that facility.
But you have no security.
We have security and
You have no security for jobs. There's nothing in there to say.
We do not
You
have
said
a
you
clawback.
anticipate
We do not have a specific clawback that says we're going to pay, we do for the wage standard.
I also asked you to do one thing for me, and that was to go back to the LEDC and see if we couldn't reverse the cost of the city and the county. Did you do that?
No.
All right, thanks.
Madam Chairman. I think that notwithstanding these picks and counterproductive, in my mind, questions to do anything and everything that's possible to try to defeat this economic opportunity here before us, I'd like to encourage us to, we could be here all morning with these points. I think the overriding good far outweighs any of these fine considerations. I think that, and the other thing that I don't like, there's a sense of admonishment here that I don't appreciate. I think it's putting Mr. Hughes, who's our executive for economic development, in a position of being unprepared and not having all of the answers that certain people on this commission could gin up in order to thwart what we're trying to accomplish here. I would like to recommend that we move ahead in the spirit of the people of Lee County to do what we can to follow suit, to approve this, and to move on. We could sit here all morning long, and I'm not going to, for one, to listen to these picks and picks and picks. I see the pattern. Everybody does. It goes on with every single agreement we have. We're making progress. We have safeguards. We're dealing with an honorable company. And I think for us to sit here and to wag our finger at this gentleman is wrong. And I'd like to apologize to you for it, Mr. Hughes, personally, because I think it's unnecessary, but it's part of the plan. And I think we ought to get on with the vote, please.
Madam Chair, let me respond.
I want to respond to this one,
Okay,
because
go
that
ahead.
was directed at me.
It sure was.
I asked Mr. Hughes over the phone the other day to answer these questions, so he had the time to do that.
Maybe,
and I don't
maybe not.
need your criticism. You have no more right than anybody else to ask questions here. And because your spirit seems to be one way or the other to give away money without guarantees, I'm just looking for guarantees for our county people. I don't need your lectures anymore.
Madam Chair, and this is not to be confrontational. This is, and I disagree with the observation of the honorable gentleman on the left. The fact is that I'm not picking at this agreement. We picked at it the other night. I'm not picking at this agreement for sake of picking to build a cheap case of why we shouldn't do this, or a technical case. I'm trying to comply with the law. And I understand that we want to create jobs. I want to create jobs in this county faster and more and better than anybody else. But the fact is that I pointed out one thing, where there's an inconsistency in the agreement, where the resolution doesn't even match the contract. That's not picking, that's just making things compliant with the law. And the second thing about trying to get a consistency with what we've been instructed to do by the School of Government is not picking. It's trying to comply with case law of North Carolina. So to accuse me of picking at this thing for political or other reasons is ridiculous. I'm trying to be compliant with the law, and I think the citizens of this county deserve that we are honorable citizens, honorable representatives of their interests, as Mr. Commissioner Parks is trying to point out, that we're guaranteeing them they're going to get what they're contracting for. And what I'm trying to do is get it so that we are the model county in complying with case law and the North Carolina general statutes when we do these things. That's all I'm trying to do.
Well, I think that the honor is just as great here as it is on your part. I believe this is a consistent pattern that goes on, and I believe that it is a mistaken notion. I think that we have our attorney here who is employed to give us legal advice and has done so. And I think on the whole, on balance, we are about, hopefully, to approve something that will be very beneficial to the people of Lee County. $12 million of capital development how many jobs?
58.
58 jobs when we are begging for work for people. I mean, you know, we could sit here and talk about the fine points of the law, but to my mind, and I'm simpler minded perhaps than some of my esteemed colleagues, I think that it says, let's do it, let's move on. This is good, and let's get our business taken care of and move on to other things. I'd like to call for a vote, please.
Well, not everybody's had a chance to enter into the discussion. Commissioner Oldham?
Well, I just like to say, you know, we've done this before, and I know there's a lot of questions, and I appreciate everyone's interest, you know. But, you know, this is something I think we should have done 15 minutes ago. I mean, we should have voted on this thing. And if you got questions concerning these things, you know, you can always go to the council's office. You don't have to do it the day we're going to meet. You can do it the day before. Get those questions answered.
Well, this was given to us last night, okay? I mean, it's not exactly an opportunity to run down to the councilor's
You had
office.
from last night till 9 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, I was in
here
another
at 8
board,
o'clock
I was
this
in
morning.
another board meeting at 8 o'clock, okay?
I
I'm
was
sorry.
until 9:15 Wednesday night, but you know.
Getting this thing at the last minute and asking us to review this thing and vote on it, basically de facto the way it is, it's just ridiculous.
You
Even
spent
Commissioner-
20 years somewhere you would give 5 minutes to do something.
That's right, but that was combat, okay? And then we did it with brute force, okay? As opposed to doing, taking
Commissioner
this thing
Reeves, do
apart.
you have a?
You know, this is long enough. We need to get out of business and.
Well, I have a couple of questions before we take it to a vote. Commissioner Reeves?
Did I understand you say the state does have a clawback on jobs?
Yes, and when they have one NC, Department of Commerce, any of those grant programs out there, even with the JDA program, it is based strictly on jobs and payroll out there. But that's what they pay on. They don't pay for investment.
Because they don't get a benefit out
They
of the
don't get a
investment.
benefit. The benefit for them is the payroll, taxes. The benefit for this county is the investment. That's the direct investment. That's the number. That's really the only number that we can see. Everything about jobs and the associated additional value with the jobs created in the community. Those are based on models that are out there. Those added that I talked about earlier.
Commissioner Haskell, do you have any questions? I have just a couple. Bob, you were probably around here then, but in 1997, 2003, 2004, Imperial did get 3 different incentive payments that totaled almost $52,000. What were those for, do you know?
Well, the original plant and an expansion of the original plant. We had 2 contracts with them for the original plant. We had one, it was a 5-year 50% deal back then. The second contract was a 5-year 50% deal with them.
Okay.
So those payments were associated with those contracts.
And do you recall, I don't have those agreements, were the 5-year 50% for equipment, or was it for?
Both real estate improvements and equipment.
Okay, so it's very likely to say that the equipment benefit tax-wise to the county is no longer with us.
Not necessarily. I mean, obviously there's depreciation, and the county goes through that depreciation process, but that process over a 5-year period goes from, by our calculations, from let's say 95% or 90% down to about 50%. After that, it goes down, and Dwayne's here. It may go down to 25%, but there's always a value there.
Dwayne, is there ever any time when equipment is fully depreciated in 5 years or 7 years rather than?
It depends on the schedule we get from the state, but most equipment has a residual value where it caps off at about 10%, maybe 20% or so. It just depends on what type of equipment it is and the state schedules that are given to us, but most of it has a residual value.
And there's rapid depreciation, you know, that the federal government allows now for equipment. That's between the company and the feds.
I know, I just did 3 tax returns and took advantage of it.
Right, but at the local level, they've got a schedule that's been provided by the Department of Revenue.
Okay. In your opinion, they bought all this property last fall. I think this was asked the other day. And this is where I think some of us maybe, you can see from the original Imperial things that you know, we can't pick winners and losers, and sometimes they're not in there for the long haul. I think your document that you gave us said that, you know, they expanded based on the business they were gonna get from Townsend. Townsend closed, and so that's what the problem, in my opinion, is when governments pick and choose winners. But I still contend, you know, a lot of people say if it weren't for this, that we wouldn't have the addition to the tax base. I think there are probably 3 or 4 times that I can think of that these companies already made the investment here. They were coming anyway, and now then we're giving this back. My question to my colleagues here is, if you look at the exceedingly in 10 million that we've given over the last probably 10 years in incentives, you know, would our county be better off if that 10 million had been used to reduce our debt, to maybe have the resources to put into our civic center,
Or the community college expansion?
or the community college expansion? So, you know, to say that it increases our tax base, that's a faulty assumption, because if they've invested, you know, money ahead of time, they're probably coming anyway. So,
Madam Chair, let me say this, you'd have to ask the people that picked up those jobs it created if it was worth what we spent or not. That's who you'd have to ask, because it creates jobs.
But we don't have any empirical evidence that it does.
no.
None.
No,
We
you
have
have so
zero.
many
We've
people-
asked for it repeatedly. We don't get empirical evidence that shows net jobs are created. I mean, we're giving $250,000 to a company this year, in what in effect is a tax rebate, and they're laying off people. Okay, so I mean, we can't say that we've got that it's a jobs creating mechanism without empirical evidence to back it up.
I think one thing we can all agree on is that we have a real challenge in Lee County. We've heard it from Caterpillar and others, is the quality of our workforce. Is, you know, companies are having a hard time. There's that skills gap. And we've heard from Dr. Marchant, who says that his classes for those skills, people in our own community who have job openings that pay $60,000 a year cannot find the people to fill those positions.
And that's the reason we need these jobs. You don't have to be a qualified machinist, or you don't have to go to CCCC to learn how to pack ham or put something on ice.
These
We need
are
jobs
not
for
being created,
everybody.
Doc. They're already there.
Some
They're
of
going to
these, some of
create
these
58.
Some of these jobs will be created in the region, with or without this incentive. I just tell you that they're going to create, and there are other jobs that will be created without incentives, and the economy will eventually recover and grow, and people will have opportunities to do this. We are, in effect, when we give these incentives, we are intruding into the private sector to unbalance what should be driven by supply and demand. And what will happen is it'll resolve itself sometime downstream. Either the company will close or the company will thrive and on its own merits. But by us getting involved in the process, what we're doing is we're upsetting what otherwise should be driven by you know, supply and demand and capitalism, which is the way our economy is run.
We can continue to discuss this all day
Yeah, we're
long.
getting into conjecture
Let's
and
go ahead and have a vote.
hypotheticals. Let's vote and move on, please. Everybody's had a chance.
I think we've all had a chance to state our concerns and on this. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Charlie,
Nay,
did you,
nay. I'm sorry, nay.
as much as you oppose?
4 and 3, yeah.
What's the process when he,
He was over there thinking, and you asked him, and he said nay, so
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're all right.
so it's 4 to 3? Okay.
He didn't say yay at the beginning.
So the last meeting I had my colleague on the left here telling somebody to vote. Now I'm.
No, I did not tell someone.
Okay.
I asked someone if they voted.
Okay.
I'd like to thank the board for this action. I'd like to see us get excited about the opportunities here. I think we are presented from time to time with some nice opportunities in Lee County because of a lot of the good things that we have going on in this community. You know, it is a war out there to try to get projects to any community. And we're competing every day. And there are companies, there are EDs like ours here in this county that are approaching our companies every day about the possibility of moving to their particular location, their state, or their community. So it's a war out there. Everybody's vying for something, and we have been very, very fortunate in this community, and we need to continue to get the support from the county, the city, and the town of Broadway to continue this process. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Bob.
Before you go, Bob, would you kindly suggest to the EDC that this is 2012, we went through this in 2011, 10, back these, and on the spur of the moment decisions for the board. Some of these things maybe should be felt out on the front end of you negotiating with parties and giving us a heads up on the dates that they must be done. Because if we don't, I'm afraid you're headed down the same path we are trying to get away from. That's me speaking.
Okay,
The rest of the board can take their own positions. But
thank you.
I'd like to just add one comment, Mr. Hughes. I said it last night, but I would most sincerely appreciate if there's anything that you can do to encourage a full board meeting and to get quorum. I think that really stings me to think that you cannot, that you're having to operate on less than a quorum and go always to your executive committee, which is valid. But I'd like to see participation, if not 100%, 90%. And I do wish and hope you will take at least this commissioner's word back that they are being watched for their interest and enthusiasm about just what you've talked about this morning. And I think it manifests itself best with their presence around these tables. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bob, for the record, I do support the Rural Economic Development Grant when it's used for infrastructure, because I do see that as a role of government to do what we can to get the infrastructure in place so companies can relocate or expand here. So, you know, I've gone on record as saying that if there's any rural economic development grants that come that specifically are earmarked, if you would, for infrastructure, I would be supportive of that.
Ditto that. I'll say the same
Rural
thing.
Center, the Rural Center has some great programs, as does the Department of Commerce. So we'll take advantage of those when we can.
I was looking at with this one, you know, with all the site development that I see here, it's going to create more jobs than the 58 that's listed in here. We got people out there in the grading business and the utility business. I talk to them every day. They're hurting. They need work. They don't need it next week. They need it tomorrow. They got people that's worked for them for 20 years. They got on temporary layoff. So if we can create 10 jobs outside there grading, let's create 10 jobs outside grading. That's what I want to see. I want to help the citizens of Lee County. And for us to sit and talk about incentives like we have, when Chatham County stops paying incentives, when Siler City and Wake County, then maybe we can stop.
Well,
but until then, we got to compete.
Well, Doc, we ought to do what they're doing and put thresholds in place that say that we won't do them for under this value or whatever. I mean, I think the county manager even agrees with that we need to get some sort of model together that has thresholds. So it's not just any old thing that's thrown in
That's
front of us.
definitely something that I want to see this board discuss. And moving on, because I know several of us have meetings at 10 o'clock. Next one is yours, John. Approval emergency purchase for jail security.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank
Have a good day.
you. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you
As
very
we've
much.
discussed previously, we have a situation at the jail where we need to go ahead and replace the jail security system. And we took bids yesterday on the replacement of the system, and we received 3 qualified bids, and Stanley Convergent was the low bid. Their base bid was $252,300 on a projection of $250,000. So they were, even with us fast tracking it, we were right there at our number. The architect is familiar with this bidder. I did notice that they have an office in Greensboro, but I believe their home office is somewhere in the Midwest. So they do have a local presence, but
John, have they done work with other, I see that they're certified in North Carolina. Have they done work with other jails in North Carolina?
yes.
Okay, good.
Madam Chair, I got a motion.
Okay.
That you approve the low bid from Stanley Convergent at $282,300. And I got a couple of questions I want to ask before we get started.
Okay, motion has been made to approve the bid from Stanley Convergent. Now we'll have discussion, so Commissioner Odom, which,
I was going to ask the county managers, we are going to ask them for a performance bond.
Yes, sir. The letter from the architect says by doing this action today, it will allow the contractor to get his performance bond and a payment bond. So It is a requirement of the contract.
Within what we were looking for.
Yes, sir.
That's all my question.
You said that you did an engineering estimate, and it comes in close to our engineering estimate, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Within $2,300.
Okay.
You didn't give it to them, did you?
Well, I think they all ask, so, I mean, it's
So they all
public
knew what it
information,
was
so-
up front?
Yes,
Okay.
they knew what the budget was.
Any other questions?
Just one other item. I didn't see a scoring matrix here, but I guess it's intuitively obvious that this bid was not only the low bid, but it was a substantially lower than the other two. Can you
On this
explain
type of
why?
bid, on this type of bid, we don't do a scoring matrix.
We got an engineer's estimate.
But I'm just curious, why would you think, why do you suppose? Is it because they didn't have a lot of time to look at it and they just had to safeguard their bids, or what? was it?
Some of them probably felt more comfortable with it. I mean, the low bid probably felt more comfortable with it than
There just
the
aren't a
others.
whole lot of companies that do this, right?
There are.
You got a few that kind of specialize, like John says, those, they feel comfortable doing the work, where someone that does it every now and then.
No,
really
no,
wouldn't.
the contract we're gonna have with them that you plan, will require some pretty stringent time standards, and they're okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, 'cause I
And
mean.
the contract still has to come back to the board.
Right, I know, but I mean, they're upfront, they understand that they're gonna be under the gun for a time standard.
At the pre-bid conference, we told them that the time was critical.
Okay.
When do we anticipate this being completed, once the contract is signed and everything's done?
90 to 120 days.
That's going to be in the contract.
Yes.
All right.
And Tracy's fully on board with this, and
I was ready to go yesterday.
Immediate sign.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Unanimous. Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.